Okay, in the second video, let's talk about deductive reasoning. And that's the process of using facts, rules, definitions, that should say DEF. So it's the process of using facts, rules, definitions, or properties to reach a valid conclusion. So here, in the first one, we're told to determine a valid conclusion that follows from the statement below. So first of all, let's just focus on the statement before we read the rest of these instructions. So here's the statement. If two numbers are odd, then their sum is even. That's the statement. So we have to come up with something valid from that follows it, given each condition. So here's the condition. Here's another condition. If there's no logic that you can conclude something based on, you'll write no valid conclusion and explain why. And with examples, this will become more clear. So first of all, if two numbers are odd, then their sum is even. So what this is telling me is that I take some odd number, like 3, and add it to some other odd number, like 11. It's telling me that the result is going to be 14, which would be even, because I sum those numbers up. So the two numbers are 7 and 3. Well, first of all, these are odd numbers. And let's just test this out. Let's write 7 plus 3 equals 10. Well, here's the statement. Here are two odd numbers, so I can assume that because they are that way, the sum is even. Excuse me, the sum of 7 and 3 are even. Is even. Geez, I'm on a roll here. Okay, so based on that, I feel like we could make a good conclusion. Well, here it says the sum of two numbers is 14. Well, you could be thinking, okay, cool, that must mean that those two numbers are odd. But what if the numbers instead were 10 plus 4? Is 10 even? Is 4 even? So even if it's 14 and they're telling us that, there is really no valid conclusion. And I would explain myself by saying because even numbers can add up to 14. So it doesn't have to depend on the two numbers being odd. And although it hasn't really showed up yet, this would be me contradicting it, just like I mentioned in the previous video when I brought up a black swan. As soon as I prove something wrong, it doesn't have to go that direction. So I contradicted this part. This is still always true. Determine a valid conclusion that follows from a statement below. So here's the statement. There will be a quiz every Wednesday. Well, it is Wednesday. That's the first statement. So what can you conclude? Well, if it is Wednesday and you have a quiz every Wednesday, we can assume there will be a quiz. Okay, now what if it was Tuesday, though? It is Tuesday. There will be a quiz every Wednesday. Part of you might want to be like, well, there will be no quiz. There will be no test. We don't know that. Maybe there's a pop quiz or something. So here I would say no valid conclusion. And as far as how would you explain this, like why? Well, it doesn't really depend on the other thing. We could say it is not Wednesday. Okay. You'll see more problems like that in your book practice. So here we got a counterexample. If a triangle has a perimeter of 3 centimeters, then each side measures 1 centimeter. Now here's what you're probably picturing. 1, 1, 1. And now we have to remember that a perimeter is the distance around a shape, and sure enough, 1 plus 1 plus 1 would be 3. So now we need to come up with a triangle where that's not true. Draw a right triangle that looks somewhat like this. Now, what if this was 2? That would mean that the other two sides would have to add up to 1. So maybe this is like 1/4, and that's 3/4. But sure enough, I have drawn something that adds up to 3, and this would not agree with this. And I think a drawing is appropriate, but we can explain ourselves. We can say a triangle, the symbol of a triangle can just be written like that, could have sides that measure 1/4, 3/4, and 2. So I contradicted this. This is not 100% true in all cases. And you could have come up with a different example too, like a triangle where it would be 1/2, 1/2, and then 2. That would also be a right triangle. Now, I didn't present you with a ton of different examples. The reason I didn't is because these are a little bit all over the place. And each one is different from all the other ones. So because of that, the assignment might be a little bit more frustrating than the other ones because each one is a little bit different from the one before. That's totally okay and completely normal. Just make sure that if you run into a wall, that you put out a valid effort and that you're starring them to come back to later.